So I brought something with me today. Nice, ordinary gray Bible, and if you can look closely at it, you'll see it's kind of tattered. And this Bible has great value. And I want to tell you why. Because you might look at this Bible and say, well, it looks like a Bible, and you might value it because it's a Bible. But it's kind of a tattered one, and even if you look closely, you'll see that I have little notes written all over it. Well, the reason this Bible is particularly valuable to me, it was my first Bible, my first study Bible, New King James. So I dug into this thing, and opening this Bible right here is where I really learned to kind of digest God's Word and get into it for myself. For the first time in my life, I was spending hours in it, and it happened as I sat over this Bible, and I can look back over it and see all kinds of notes and highlights, and it's funny reading notes in your Bible that you made 30 years ago. Isn't that interesting? Oh, I wrote that. That's kind of interesting, and some of it's good, and some of it's like, interesting, But anyway, so you could have this Bible on your shelf, and it would probably just be another Bible to you. This is not just another Bible to me. I rebound this about 15 years ago, spent way too much money to do it, but I had to because I care about this Bible. It has value to me that it would have to no one else, right? Got another thing to show you this morning. You might not be able to see this as well, but this is a ring. And if I showed you this ring closely, you would see there's diamonds. And this is an attractive ring, right? And it's valuable as far as it's worth something monetarily. So you may see this ring and you may value it because it has monetary worth or it looks nice. But you would never value this ring the way my wife values this ring because the monetary value is pretty insignificant to her. What matters to my wife is that this was her grandmother's ring, right? So in reality, it's invaluable, not just valuable. You get what I'm saying? In fact, it's so invaluable to her that there's only two rings she doesn't take off ever, her wedding ring and this ring. In fact, I've got it now. I should probably go give it back to her. But anyway, I'm really nervous, actually. I got to hold on to this thing because if I lose it, I'm in huge trouble. But you know how that is, don't you? There are things and people in your life that are invaluable. You care about those things in a way that nobody else does. We all have those things, don't we? Those people in our lives. And, that kind of care, that value you put on something, it comes from a perspective, right? And with people, even more than commodities, that is an important perspective. The way you look at someone and care for them is kind of a big deal. Because, as much as I care about this Bible, I don't actually need this Bible. And in the end, this Bible isn't going to be eternal like people are, right? So, yeah, the way we care about people is an interesting thing to pursue. Because I was thinking about this the other day as I was walking through a hospital to go see my dad. There's all kinds of people in these rooms. And there are people that care deeply about them, and I'm not one of them. It's kind of a weird thing to say, isn't it? But when I go to a hospital, there's all kinds of hurting people that are cared deeply about, but I'm only going to one room. And I'm going to the room of the man that I care deeply about, and nobody else in that hospital is visiting, except for the nurses. You know what I'm saying? It's astonishing to think of all the billions of people in this world, I only care about that many of them, actually. I hope I would care about others if I actually met them, but honestly, it's born out of the sheer fact that I just don't know that many people, right? But I want you to think about that reality with the people you care about, right? You care about precious few people, given the number of people that are in this world, but the fact that you care about them a lot more than almost everyone else, in some cases, more than anyone else in this world. You have those people in your life, don't you? And here's what we're going to get to this morning. Because whoever those people are, and however much you care about them, Do you know that Jesus cares about them infinitely more than you do? So as much as I care about my I care about my kids more than any of you in this room. That's even grandparents, right? And I care about my wife more than anyone in this room, and that might get argued with, right? But even the people I care about the most, and I know I care about them more than anyone in this world does or ever could. The comparison of how much Jesus cares for them versus how much I care for them, you cannot even compare those things. Because Jesus' care for them, his value for them is indescribable, unimaginable, far beyond what I could ever dream or describe to you. But here's what we're going to do. To understand just how much Jesus does care more about the people you care most about, we're going to take a look at Jesus' life. And we're going to look at that and sink into that reality that, man, the way I live my life and the way I care about people has to be done under this reality that Jesus cares so much more about them than I ever will. And that's going to mean something in the way I love them, but in the way that I trust Jesus and his care for them. So let's dig into Luke 7. And before we look at Luke 7, I just want to ask you this one question, because I want you to really read this passage and listen to what we're looking at today, or what we're talking about today, with people in mind. Who do you care about the most in this life? Put those names and faces in your mind right now. Maybe you got your arm around one of them, right? Maybe some of them are sitting in the row with you right now. Maybe they're not here, right? It's a spouse, it's children, it's siblings, it's parents. Maybe it's people in this room or coworkers. There's all kinds of people you can fit into this category of the people you care about the most, the people you care about more than other people. But have those people in mind because they're going to be relevant to this passage. Luke 7, verse 1. After he had finished all his sayings, that sermon on the plain that we were talking about for these past 2 weeks, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion, this is a Roman centurion, had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. Right? So this is someone this centurion cares deeply about. And this is an interesting thing because Roman centurions, Roman soldiers in general, weren't married. They weren't allowed to be. So they didn't have a spouse. They didn't have family. They probably, in his case, chattel slaves. I mean, they're not just property to him. Most likely, this servant is more like a family member to him. And that should come across in the fact that he says he's highly valued. Not just someone who could do stuff, but highly valued by him. Don't miss that part. The centurion highly values this person. He cares about this servant more than most anyone else does. Okay, let's keep reading here. Verse 3, when the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. So a Gentile sending Jews to talk to a Jewish teacher kind of makes sense, doesn't it? So that's what he had in mind here. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, he, the centurion, is worthy to have you do this for him, Jesus, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent other friends, saying to him, Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore, I did not presume to come to you, but, listen to this, say the word, and let my servant be healed. Jesus, just speak. You don't even have to come. Just say it, and it'll happen. Verse 8, for I too am a man set under authority. This is the centurion speaking. With soldiers under me, I say to one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turned to the crowd that followed him, and said, I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. So the first reality we're going to see about the fact that Jesus cares more about the people that you care most about is that because he cares more, you can trust the authority of Jesus over them. Jesus cares, and you can trust his authority over that person and their life. Right? So consider this centurion. He's got this servant who's highly valued to him, a servant who's on his deathbed. Right? And consider the source. The centurion, he's this Roman soldier who has himself great authority. He's acknowledging that in the text, right? I can just speak to a man, go, and the man does it. Like, this guy has and understands authority. And at the same time, being who he is, a Gentile soldier with great authority, he also realizes that he's in a situation where he can't fix it. There's nothing he can do. With all the authority at his fingertips, there's nothing he can do to deal with this situation. Maybe there were doctors involved. We don't know what was going on. But of course, he realizes Jesus is going to have to do something about this because I can't. And he was willing to do that. And that's what we do for the people we care about, right? We go to any lengths. We do whatever it takes to try to take care of them, to have somebody involved in caring for them when we can't. Everything just means more when it comes to the people you love, doesn't it? And that's what the centurion is facing now. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll humble myself. I'll go to a Jewish teacher. I'll do whatever it takes to treat and care for this servant that I value. And he does so by going to the one who does have the authority to do something about it. Isn't that beautiful? He goes to Jesus because he realizes, Jesus, you do have the authority that I don't. I care about this person, and I'm hoping that you'll use your authority to care for them in the way that I can't. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that the essence of trust? Isn't that the essence of our prayer life? We're going to Jesus because we're acknowledging his authority and our inability. And that's not a bad thing. It's a very good thing, isn't it? And that's what the centurion is doing here. But here's the real question. The question isn't, does Jesus have authority to do something about it? Because that seems to be settled in the centurion's mind. He's asking Jesus because he does believe Jesus has authority to do something about it. The question is, does Jesus care about this person the way I do? I think that's actually the underlying question in his mind. I value this person. Does Jesus? It's an interesting kind of thought, isn't it? Because people I may not care about are people that other people do care deeply about. Whether it's walking through a hospital and realizing that I don't care because I'm indifferent or calloused about these people. I simply don't know them. And I'm spending my time going after the person I do care about. Right? I remember coming back here from the Bahamas, how, I hear about natural disasters that happen. You hear about earthquakes in Asia and hurricanes in the Caribbean and all that. And I used to hear about that and think, oh, that'd be pretty terrible. I feel bad for those people. But that was a couple moments until I just kind of went on living my life, right? And I might actually even pray for those people for a couple seconds. But to say I really cared about them or that my soul was in anguish for them, no, probably not. Until I moved to the Bahamas. And then I got to know people there. And when we moved back, there was a tremendous storm in 2019. And I was hearing reports from the people I loved about them losing their loved ones, and it hit me a different way, didn't it? Why? Because I cared now, right? Even for the people I didn't know, I cared because I was invested. I had a certain perspective that I was coming from. So as much as there are so many things I don't care about, the few things I do care about, I get what it means to care about those things. And I say that because of this. What is beyond the scope of God's care? Or better yet, whom is beyond the scope of God's care? That's the question that really needs to hit home with us this morning. Because when I think about the people I do or don't care about, the reality is that God cares about anybody more than anybody else. All right? Or here's a more provocative way to say that. God cares about the person who hates him the most more than you care about the person you love the most. Think about that for a second. The person over in Africa or Asia who hates God so much that they would murder Christians. God loves that person more than you love your spouse and your child and your grandchildren and your siblings and so on and so forth. That's hard to grasp. Almost even hard to believe. But we know it's true. God cares that much about the people you love, much less the people you hate or your enemies or that would want to kill you. So let that hit home. He cares more about the most devout atheist and the most, what we would call, worthless person than we care about the people we love. So, yeah, highly valued. God knows what highly valued means. So don't ever think that you can't trust him with the people you love, because he values them more than you ever will. But here's the second part about what we see about the centurion and his willingness to trust the authority of Jesus over the life of this servant that he cared so much about. And that's the interchange that happens here, because when the Jews go to Jesus, what do they say about the centurion? They say, Jesus, this guy really deserves for you to do this for him. That's that word worthy. He deserves it, Jesus. He's worthy. Because, he's kind of like one of us. And he even built the synagogue. I mean, this guy has done wonderful things. And you can almost see the picture of these Jews appreciate this guy, almost indebted to him for what he's done. So this is a good way to pay him back. He's kind of earned it, hasn't he? He deserves it. And yet, what does the centurion say about himself? It's drastically different, isn't it? Because when Jesus is on his way, he sends another delegation of people to say what to Jesus? I'm not even worthy for you to come up under my roof. Maybe he's safeguarding Jesus' defilement of coming under the roof of a Gentile. That could be part of it. But in reality, he just realizes who Jesus is and who he is. And he says, no. In fact, Jesus, I don't deserve for you to do this for me or for this person I love. I haven't earned it. You don't have to do it. I shouldn't expect you to do it. All I'm doing is asking as an unworthy person who deserves nothing from you. Wow. That's something, isn't it? Because as much as we may acknowledge that mentally or theologically, I would say that sometimes something sneaks into the back of our mind or maybe into our emotions where we think, why is this happening to me? Do I really deserve this? Or what did I do to deserve this? We ask questions like that, don't we? And those are honest questions, and maybe it's fair to think it or say it in the rawness of the emotion. But it really is something we need to back up on and realize is that, if this centurion can say, my place is not fit for this king, but I know that his place as the king means his word is enough. That's what the centurion says. Jesus, just speak. You don't even have to come and lay a hand on him. All you have to do is say it, and I believe that you can do it. That's remarkable, isn't it? Not because he is deserving, but simply because he knows the power and the grace of Jesus. So consider this then. We know Jesus can do whatever he wants, however he wants. But do we trust him to handle it? Do we trust Jesus to handle it, whatever it is, with the people we love? Because what makes Jesus marvel, it says Jesus marveled at him. That's an interesting statement, isn't it? Jesus marveled at a person? Well, Jesus marveled because he's pointing out this man's faith, not because the centurion is such a great man and has such great faith, but what is it that Jesus marvels at? I think it's the reality that this Gentile with all kinds of authority and power over people would humble himself enough to have the kind of faith that says this. Faith that says, the grace of God and his authority to act in my life is 100% on him, and 0% on me. Right? Grace is 100% undeserved, and if God chooses to act on that and do it, then I will be thrilled with it. But there is 0% chance here that I deserve God to do anything for me. That's the kind of faith that Jesus marveled at. It's not the man, it's what the man is realizing, and that's grace is 100% on God, 0% on me, and there's no way I can earn that. And once I'm there, I'm in a good place. That's the kind of faith I can have, the kind of trust in the authority of Jesus, that whatever's going on in the life of my loved one, however hard it is for them, Jesus can handle it. He's got it. He cares about them and can act for them in ways I could never do. And I can rest in that. I can rest in that. Isn't that good to know? I don't have to take charge. I don't have to fix it. I don't have to step in and say the perfect words so that that person is no longer in pain. I don't have to do that because Jesus has got it. He can handle it. Trust his authority over their lives. However bad it looks, however much they may be wandering, however pain they're in, whatever it means for them, trust his authority over them, right? So that's the first point. We trust his authority over them because he cares more for them. But also the second point we're going to look at today is not just trusting his authority, but knowing his real compassion for them. Right? Because Jesus cares more for the people you love, you can trust that he truly has compassion for them all the time. So let's read this next story, because this next story goes hand in hand with what we just read. Verse 11. Soon afterward, Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a great crowd went with him. As he drew near to the gate of the town, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow, and a considerable crowd from the town was with her. So that's an interesting picture here. Jesus walks into the town, and what would likely have been happening here is when somebody died, usually that day, they would wrap this person and put them on some kind of large plank or stretcher-looking thing, and they would usher them out of the city. You don't want a dead body staying in the city or in your house to make you unclean, right? So most likely, this man died that day, and this mom, who was she was a widow. The mother was both a widow and lost her only son that day, most likely. Now, I don't know if I can accurately depict the desperation and the sorrow that this woman must have been in. First of all, being a widow, some of you know what that is. But then a widow who lost her only son, the only man left to actually care for this woman. And in that society, that would have been a really big deal. Not knowing how she was going to be cared for now was a stark and awful reality. So this widow lost her only son, and they're going out of town, and you can imagine the rawness of the emotion, the sadness of the moment. Okay, it's deep. So Jesus sees this crowd starts to follow her out of the city, walking with her. And so let's keep reading to see what it says here. Verse 13. Just pay attention to this. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her. And he said to her, "Do not weep." Now, he's not just saying that like, hey, God's got it under control. He's not trying to give some trite, comfort to tell her, stop crying about this lady. God's got it. This is the reality that he's about to do something about her weeping. Okay? So watch what's happening here. He says to her, "Do not weep." Verse 14, then he came up and touched the bier. That's not a beverage. Okay? The bier is the plank, the stretcher thing that the dead body was on. Jesus sees what's going on. He has compassion on her, and that compassion causes him to go up, to the dead body of all things, right? Which as a Jew, you don't approach dead bodies. You don't do that because you'll be unclean. You'll be defiled. And he puts his hand on it. It says he touched the bier, and the pallbearers, stood still. And he said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." And the dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Remarkable, isn't it? He sees it, he has compassion on it, and all he had to do was say something like he did, and the man would have stood up. Why? This is a little bit of speculation. Why does Jesus touch the bier, the body? Why would he do that? That seems unnecessary in the whole process of what's happening here. Jesus cares, and all he had to do was say something, and the fact that he brings the man to life, that's the thing that's outstanding. What I love is the fact that Jesus goes up to the body and touches it. In essence, Jesus says, I feel your pain so much, I see what's happening here, that my ritual defilement, my uncleanness, that means nothing to me. I would rather be with you in this moment. I would rather feel your pain and be part of what's going on with you right here, right now, than to worry about whether or not I'm going to be clean for the synagogue later on this week. Interesting and not surprising that Jesus would sacrifice his own consecration in order to consecrate others. That Jesus would give up cleanness to make others clean and whole and holy. That's just who Jesus is, isn't it? And here it comes out again, but not just on a cross, in the most personal kind of way. In the midst of the deepest kind of pain, Jesus shows up and personally engages and gets as close as you can be to the situation as he's about to heal this man and give him back to his mother. What a great statement. You're alive. Here's your mother. Can you imagine? Can you imagine not just what the man himself felt being alive, but what that mother must have gone through in that moment of the deepest despair and the blackest darkness. Jesus brought my son to me. He cared enough, not because I sent servants to ask him to come and do something for me. She didn't ask Jesus for anything. Jesus just showed up and had compassion on this person who maybe didn't even know he was in town. Right? Surely she didn't, because she cared about something else, didn't she? She cared about what was going on in her own life. And yet Jesus shows up into that. And his compassion is remarkable, isn't it? He knows, listen, that word compassion is a beautiful word. It's something we should really hold on to in this passage about Jesus and how we act, because this word is describing, it's an empathy that's stirred up deep within. The word itself actually relates to the bowels, the deep inner organs of a person. I mean, this is not just patting somebody on the back and saying, I'll pray for you. Okay, this is so much more, isn't it? Jesus dives into her sorrow. He knows what she's going through better than she does. Isn't that something? Because you and I both know that in those moments of deep sorrow and pain, sometimes I don't even know what I'm feeling. I don't even know what I'm thinking. Right? I'm kind of lost in it because it's just hurt. And yet, Jesus knows. Jesus knows how she feels and what she's going through better than she does. And so his compassion causes him to step into that. Her reality. He's in her shoes. He's carrying her weight, her burden, her loss. That sorrow and sense of hopelessness that she has, Jesus knows it. He understands it. What a wonderful thing. So Jesus says to her, do not weep. He leans into her life, not just to offer something trivial or something to try to get her to stop feeling bad about her life, but he's doing that because what is dead and what cannot be undone And what makes things infinitely worse, Jesus can restore, and he can make alive, and he can bring redemption. Isn't that wonderful? Jesus can do that. So his compassion for the people I love will always outweigh mine. And I'm so thankful for that. What a stark physical illustration of what Jesus does on a less temporary but more meaningful way when he gives us eternal life. The kind of life that truly overshadows the greatest pain and the losses that we face in this earth. So, consider this. When the people you love are in pain and you don't know what to do, the first thing you should do is realize this, that Jesus, well, hold that thought. Sorry, I need to read this last part. I forgot to finish the passage. So, Jesus heals the man, gives him back to his mother, and look at verse 16. Fear seized them all, and they glorified God, saying, a great prophet has arisen among us, and God has visited his people. And this report about him spread throughout the whole of Judea and all the surrounding country. Not just a prophet, but God is here. That's what they're saying about Jesus, and they're glorifying God because of it. So when you don't know what to do about the people you love and their pain, consider this. More than Jesus cares about you, more than Jesus cares about me, more than Jesus cares about the people you care about, Jesus cares about the glory of God the Father in this universe. Yeah, Jesus cares more about God than you and me and everything else, and you know that. But think about the ramifications of that, right? Because that is what we are meant to care most about. If Jesus cares most about the glory of God, we are to care about that as well. Even in the midst, especially in the midst of the worst things that are happening to us and the people we love. What we value is not the concern, it's what he values. Right? What it costs us to magnify him is not the concern, his magnificence is the concern. How hard is that to see when people are in pain and you just want it to end? Yeah, I get it. So, when we are not responding well to what is happening in the lives of our loved ones, it is likely that we are having issues with God's authority and or his compassion. Sorry, I'm not saying that as an accusation. I just want us to check our hearts on that. If I'm bothered by the way God is handling his business, especially in the lives of my loved ones, then I'm probably not trusting his authority over them like I should. And maybe I'm not knowing his compassion for them the way that I should. So that raises all kinds of issues, doesn't it? We are having a hard time trusting that his authority is leading this thing down the right road. Jesus, it's not supposed to go this way. Right? You ever think that way? Jesus, they're not supposed to have this issue. Jesus, why isn't it resolved yet? Jesus, why is it getting better or worse and not better? We have a hard time believing that he really does care about what is happening to us and them, because it seems like if he did care, he would do it differently. You ever felt that way? If you cared like I care, Jesus, then wouldn't you fix it? It may be hard to admit that. Let's just be honest with ourselves. But the struggle always starts with how we see God. So we need to face that if the root of our struggle is this lack of trust and this lack of reality about his compassion. So let me ask you this. Let's just get real personal. You remember the people I asked you to think about, who do you care about the most? Well, let's ask it straight up then. Jesus cares more about your children than you do. Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that? You're probably struggling with that more now that your kids are out of the house than they were in the house for some of you. You know that, right? Jesus cares more about your kids than you do. So what does that mean? Jesus cares more about their salvation than you do. And and whether or not they know him or don't know him. Jesus cares more about what's going to happen in their life, whether they get married or not, whether they make wrong choices or not, whether they have an addiction or not. Jesus cares about that more than you do. What about this? Jesus cares more about the safety of your children than you do. And what I mean by that is not Jesus is more interested in keeping your kids safe from all harm. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that whether your kids are free from harm for the rest of their lives or whether they face all kinds of difficulty and harm and hurt from other people, either way, Jesus cares more about your kids than you do. So, here's the trick. Let's be nuanced about this, right? Because Jesus has given you authority over your kids. That's biblical, right? But are you really trusting his authority over them more than your own? Because when I'm trusting my own authority over them more, I often go into overprotection mode, right? I'm going to shield my kid from all harm, and these are the steps I'm going to take to do that. Do I want my kids to get harmed? No, that's obvious, right? But the reality is the one error is there are people who are careless and don't have any authority over their kids and expose them to things that they shouldn't, right? That is a reality, a bad reality, but it's there. On the other hand, though, there's the parents who are so intent protecting their kids and keeping them safe from everything that they're trying to assume God's authority over their children rather than trust it. That's the quintessential question, I think, for most of us in this room. Are you taking your responsibility without abdicating the responsibility of Jesus over your kids? That's a hard question to answer, but it's a question you better be asking. Because overprotection is just as bad as underprotection. Because either way, it's us failing to recognize the authority of Jesus over our children. So again, I don't have answers for you on that. I just trust that you're going to be praying about that and trusting the guidance of the Spirit to say, all right, I am going to parent as though Jesus' authority is good enough. That I can't prevent all the things I don't want to happen to my kids from happening. But I can trust Jesus and I can point them to him. And that's enough, right? That's enough. Another example of this, what about the unhealthy people in your life? Right? We all got them. We've got sick or dying parents, or maybe they're not parents. Maybe they're children or coworkers or whoever it may be. Right? Unhealthy, and not just physically. I'm not just talking about people who have cancer or something else. They're included. But the people who are unhealthy because they've been damaged and hurt, right? Unchangeably. Something has happened in their life, and that wound will be there forever. They were abused as a child, right? They're widowed, they're divorced, whatever that pain may be, right? You want to be involved in their life. Sometimes you don't know how to be involved in their life, but whatever it is, you can trust Jesus' compassion for that person, can't you? Even in their pain, even when the doctors don't have answers, and even when things are getting worse and not better, you can trust that Jesus feels it. He's involved in it. The way he goes and touches the dead body, he's doing that for the person you love, right? The compassion that moves him to step in the most intimate and personal kind of way, Jesus does that. He is doing it. Trust it, even if you can't see it, because that's what he's like. And I can go on and on with more examples, right? But here's just a couple thoughts about Jesus, finally, and how Jesus uses us to care for people that he cares about. So first of all, realize that the care of Jesus is authoritative. And what I mean by that is, think of it parentally. When you think about the care of Jesus for other people, think about the way a parent responds and loves a child. We've all been there on either end of that aspect, right? Either as children or as parents. We know that what does the child see about their life? What's the child's perspective? You can say it. What does the child see? They see themselves right here and right now, and that's it, right? A small child will only see their life in this moment. What does the parent see? Well, the parent knows. The parent knows what they're going through. They've had other kids that age. The parent knows what's going on in the family. The parent knows what's best for this child that the child doesn't even know, right? So what the parent knows can cause conflict with what the child knows, because the child knows that they need ice cream right now, and the child knows that they should watch this show right now. And when I say no to the child, what do? You know, Mom and Dad, you really do know better. Thank you. Man, that would be great, wouldn't it? I'd probably fall over if that happened, but no, there's a response, and it's usually loud and emotional. You know, I mean, it's physical, it's emotional, it's everything. You've heard it and seen it, and especially with my youngest one right now, but I won't get into that, right? But yeah, we see all the things they don't see because they're just incapable of comprehending anything more. They just can't. To ask them to or expect them to would be silly, right? So just simply imagine yourself as the small child. You're always going to be that, no matter how old and mature you are. You're the small child, God's the parent. Trust his authority. Trust that he sees the bigger picture and knows things far beyond you in this moment. Right? Second thing we need to know is not only is his authority parental and his care as such, but secondly, he is worthy, meaning he's deserving of our faith. He deserves our trust. Do you believe that? Jesus deserves it. Right? So he's worth crying out to. Cry out to him. Right? Be real with him. Share your raw emotion with him. All of these things. But whatever you do, don't stop interacting with Jesus because he deserves your trust. Don't stop interacting with him, because the moment you do is the moment that you might be turning your head another way to interact with something else. Your pain, your desire to fix it, whatever it is. Don't turn away from Jesus. Third thing, as far as just practical, is that Jesus' compassion is exemplary in terms of it's an example for how he wants to mobilize us in the lives of other people. Because Jesus' care for the people you love does come through you and me. That's what the church is for, isn't it? We learn from his compassion by staying engaged with people. Okay? When we see the compassion of Jesus, we act on it. We do that. Right? We are hands and feet, so to speak, aren't we? And it's hard to stay in the trenches with someone, isn't it? You got your own issues to deal with too. How am I expected to take on other people's emotional turmoil and give time to that when I can barely handle my own? I get it, right? I understand that. But feel it with them. Have compassion. Stay when their progress seems stalled, because consistent care, listen to this, consistent care from the body of Christ is our functional service to God and his service to them as well. Right? That's part of how God cares for people, is through the body of Christ. I want you to think about that, because as frail as you may feel about life and things going on, and your inability to be strength for someone else, if Jesus wants you to be that, to be compassionate for somebody else. I read this interesting story, and this illustrates what the church is to us and what we are being part of the church. Right? Story about a science project where kids had to build a bridge out of popsicle sticks and Elmer's glue. Right? This is not exactly structural steel, right, engineers? Popsicle sticks and Elmer's glue. The goal is you build a bridge and to see how much force and weight it can withstand, right? It's a pretty interesting project, isn't it? Because one popsicle stick has almost no strength, right? I can easily snap this in two without even trying or thinking about it. But this kid, he took 160 popsicle sticks, which is not much, and a bunch of Elmer's glue, which we safe enough to give to we're not giving rubber cement to our kids, right? We give them Elmer's. And he built a bridge, a half-pound bridge of popsicle sticks that could withstand 1,100 pounds. Think about that. That's rather incredible. Some of you engineers are like, I could do better. But that's amazing, isn't it? To build a bridge out of popsicle sticks, a half pound that could withstand a half ton. That's phenomenal. Now, one popsicle stick on its own is not going to carry a couple pounds. But you glue 160 of them together, it can carry an incredible amount of weight. And I want you to realize something about the way God cares for you. The way God cares for you is he's plopped you right here in this building with these people. And so let's remember that, to care for one another and lean on this body to care about, because one popsicle stick on its own, you and me, we're not going to be able to hold on to much or withstand much. But 160 of us glued together in Jesus Christ, his church, his bride, when he builds us that way, then what can we withstand? Anything he wants. That's the point, right? He builds us in a way to withstand anything he wants us to withstand. But that's what he's done with his church. Buy into that, right? Lean into that. I feel like we're pretty good at caring for one another, but don't assume that's true. We've got to leverage that. We've got to step into it and be that way for one another. Because that's the way Jesus cares. That's how much he cares about each and every one of us. So Tabor, just spend some time with them this week, would you? The people you care about most, what are you really concerned about? What's hitting home and hitting hard with you about them? And do you believe that Jesus cares for them more than you ever could? If you believe it, then begin to trust his authority and know his compassion for them like you've never known before. The worship team's going to come. We're going to sing a song to close, but let's just give thanks to Jesus for his care for us this morning. Jesus, thank you for the depth of your care and love for us, depth that would make you value the servant of a Roman centurion far more than anyone else ever could. Compassion that would reach out to a lonely widow in her darkest hour and meet her need in such an incredible way. And Jesus, your authority and compassion that would take you to a cross where you would give up your own life and you would take on the wrath of God for our sakes. You cared that much for us. How could we not know and trust your care for all the people in our lives? Lord, help us in our anxiety. Help us in our struggle and in our pain and our desire to fix things, Lord, to lean on you with all of our might so that we could know just how mighty you are. Thank you that all we have is you, Jesus, because you're all we need. We pray these things in your name. Amen.